everyone. Welcome to another Empowering Your Circle podcast. And I'm very excited. Not only have I got a really nice guest today, which we're going to find out some lovely information about, but the sun is shining and it's quite warm. So that's quite nice. But I'm very excited to have Samina Aslam with me, an amazing private solicitor. We're going to go through that word in a minute because I think a lot of people are a bit like, what does that mean? But she's got over 16 years experience focusing on all the things that we absolutely need to have in our lives. Sadly, I think some people are remiss at having them, which is we're going to find out the reasons why you need them. Wills and trusts and probates, powers of attorney, tax planning. So, you might be sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, how is this important to me? But please stay with me on this podcast because actually, Samina has a really good way of getting this advice out to people so that you can learn. And I think it's anywhere between the start of your adult life right through to retirement, anything in between. I've known Samina now for over a year, and I think she's amazing with her clients. I listen to her knowledge. She's really, really good at what she does. And so I'm so excited, Samina, to have you on my program. So what I would like to know is one of the things you spoke about is lining your ducks up in a row. I kind of like that saying, but what does that actually mean to somebody who's an ordinary family owner, member, whatever, that's sitting out there right now thinking, what does she mean about lining your ducks up in a row?
I think what I mean by that is just that I think everybody needs to get organized. Simple as that. So there are certain essential legal documents that need to be put in place. And I am very passionate about making sure that people, have those in place. And that's what I mean when I say have line your ducks in a row. So essentially it's like, your wills, your LPA, which stands for lasting powers of attorney, tax planning. So that's what I mean.
Right. And they're like words that a lot of people get nervous about, right? Because they're a really big, important thing. But sometimes those things are the things that people are more scared of and have kind of this fear about. So should they really be fearful? Because I mean, I know, it's a big deal, but people are fearful of it.
I mean, I see that all the time. Nobody wants to speak to me until they have to. And that kind of hits the nail on the head. Most of my clients come to me when the trouble has really, it's really hit them. Whereas my viewpoint is, I can help you avoid that. Certain things in life we can't avoid. So which is why I always say, just get organized, be proactive. You just need to see me once. And that's the angle I come from. I take a very preventative approach. So I don't think people need to be scared about it. But at the same time, I fully appreciate there are, certain taboos. Nobody wants to talk about death or, how much money people have. We have this stigma almost. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that causes a problem.
Yeah.
I am of the view, be open about it, have a discussion with a family, get things sorted out, everything is clear, and that way, you reduce that risk of things becoming a lot more stressful later on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of those things that we really and truly all think someone else is, why do I need to do it? It's fine. Why do I need a will? Why do I need whatever? And I think we just get to a point where you don't, unless you've been through it, where you've actually had to see for yourself estate planning and probate and all that sort of thing. It's very difficult, especially if you're young, to think that this is important to you. And I think, for example, if we look at it, who should have a will? I guess let's start with that. Who
Yeah.
should have a will?
I battle with with this traditional concept that, only old people need to have a will. I completely disagree with that. I just sometimes, wish somebody can sit into my office, read my files, they will realize it's got nothing to do with age. You know, uh, Death it doesn't discriminate. We don't know
Yeah,
when it's going to be our turn. In the since COVID, I've had most of my clients are young, in their
Wow.
40s, and they're dying. I'll give you one example. Uh, so we had a young man, and he was 42, going for a run, nice bright day, said goodbye to his wife, said, I'm going for a run, didn't come back home. He had a cardiac arrest during his jog, um,
Yeah.
was in a coma for three weeks, and sadly passed away. Had nothing planned. And the poor wife was left with three children, didn't have a clue. So can you imagine the stress levels? So I think since COVID, this rising number of young people passing away and me having to deal with their estate, it's really kind of put that in, it's put that in emphasis that we just don't know when it's going to be our turn, and everybody should get their lives in order. Everybody. The minute you hit 18, get a will done. If you think that's too young, whenever you buy your first property, or you're about to get married, you're having your first child, you've got your job, get a will done, because you'll have money coming into the bank, which is an asset. You know?
Yeah, and that's the same. I said to my son the other day, I've got two, but the older one, who's in his 20s, and I said to him he needs to think about having a will. And he said to me, but I don't have anything to leave anybody. And I said, well, it you have what's in the bank, but I said you also have, some of your assets like in your room, things that you've bought, things that you've had,
Positions.
things that, your possessions that you might want to leave to somebody in particular, or whatever. And I said, you have to think about this sort of stuff. And of course, it's as soon as you say that again, it's like, oh my gosh, well, I'm only 20. And, and I remember when I was doing it, when my husband and I were doing our wills, when we had the children, I had somebody who I worked with at the time, and he was doing wills and stuff. So he was working on ours. But he said, who are the guardians? Who's gonna be the guardian of your children? And when you have children, that is one of the biggest things you should have a will for, because you need to think about that. And I hadn't really thought about it. We had had a few discussions, but we hadn't really thought about it. And I think that's a really important thing for a couple who have family, children to think about.
100%. You've hit the nail on the head. I think that's one of the main reasons, parents should have a will, especially, like you said, when you have children under the age of 18, because if you don't, and God forbid, both parents pass away, it's the local authority that takes charge of the children. I don't think the parents would have wanted that. So that's one of
No,
the key reasons. But just coming back to the point, for me, saving inheritance tax is also another very good reason why everybody should have a will, because let's take your point about your son is 20, he thinks he doesn't have anything, but he'll have money in his bank account, and it will grow. He'll have assets. But what people don't realize is if you pass away without a will, and you don't have any partners, no children, then there is a very set order of who inherits. So in that case, it would be your parents. So everything I own would go to my parents. By doing that, you're inflating what they own, what we say their estate, which means that you're pushing that number, and you're going to be more liable to inheritance tax. So that's another reason why everybody should have a will.
right. Yeah, and I just think it's so important. I understand my 18-year-old would say, well, I have nothing yet, which in reality, he probably doesn't as much as somebody who's in their 25, 20, 25, whatever. But I do think, the more that you think about life and where everybody's heading and what they're doing, I've been through now, sadly, both my parents passing away and having to deal with that kind of thing. My mum and dad were adamant that, they were using a solicitor to handle all the probate and things like that. In reality, I'm pretty sure we could have done some of it better, but never mind, that's a different story. But I think, at the end of the day, it was an eye-opening experience for me to see and how things worked. I mean, obviously for some people it's a very simple will. There's nothing much to worry about. They've got their home, they've got the money that's sitting in their bank account or whatever, and their possessions, and then that's it. That's more of a simple will. If you own lots of property, I'm assuming from a like inheritance tax point of view and other things, that's possibly even more a reason people need to be very careful about what they're doing and how they're planning.
Yeah, I think most of my queries, when I get a query and they say, "Oh, I need a will," and they always say, "Oh, it's a simple will. It's straightforward," and that's how it always starts. But no two couples or no two individuals are the same because your circumstances are different. There are so many variables, so many factors which determine different outcomes. So for me, when I hear that, and I think, okay, here we go, and you know, when I by the end, when I do the whole questionnaire, I go everything through with the client. 9 times out of 10, there's something extra that's needed. For example, as you said, so somebody who has a lot of assets, say property, then we need to start thinking about how can we make the will tax efficient. So when I say tax, I mean inheritance tax specifically, because I don't just do a will. I advise on the inheritance tax side as well, because it ties in really well, and it's a very good point or an opportunity where you can actually see where you stand. What is your liability position? So I think it's a very good way of looking at it as well in that sense, in terms of tax savings, inheritance tax savings.
Okay. So in terms of like powers of attorney, because that's another thing people don't think they necessarily need. Um, when my dad was very ill, mum had power of attorney, so she had the final say over a lot of things that happened. When dad had passed away, she turned around and wanted the three of us to have joint powers of attorney, and I understand a lot of solicitors do not think that that's a good idea. However, that's what she wanted. And I think it worked because, my siblings and I were all on the same page. We knew what mum wanted. And I think we were always going to make that decision, whatever it was, jointly anyway. But what does that mean for the people that are going to take on that responsibility?
Okay, before I answer your question, Hazel, I'm going to say something that's going to shock a lot of people. I actually think an LPA is more important than the will. Because if you think about it, the will comes in place or is effective once you've passed away. Whereas the LPA, the lasting power of attorney, it applies whilst you're alive. So clearly it's going to come in first. So yes, we all want to make sure that we live healthy, we don't lose our mental capacity, nothing happens. But like I said, we don't know. The best thing you can do is just get it done. It's like an insurance policy. Just get it done, put it away, hoping that it's not never going to be used. So I always say to clients, when they say I want a will, I always say get an LPA. They go hand in hand. It's
Mhm.
it's very it's a missed opportunity if you don't do the LPA, but you've got a will. Okay. Coming to your question, so what does it mean? So when you have an LPA, so say you've got an LPA, Hazel, okay? You're doing it to say that I'm going to select or choose certain individuals who will come into my shoes and make decisions for me in case I lose capacity. If I do, they make decisions for me in my best interests.
Okay.
So that's you. And then whoever you choose, be very careful who you choose because they've got to be trustworthy, reliable, and they're going to step up and do the job. That's what I always say. Um, but if the LPA has to be used, so say God forbid you lose capacity, you've chosen your two sons who are the people who will act for you. The legal term is attorney, but I don't like to use that word because it confuses people with the American
Yes,
term.
I think
So
it does.
I use
Yeah.
the word trusted individual. Okay,
Right.
so you're doing the LPA and you have appointed your two sons who are going to be your trusted individuals. Okay, and let's hope it's never going to be used, but in case if it has to be used because you've lost capacity, then your two sons are going to be in your shoes and make decisions for you. For example, they'll have access to your bank accounts. If you've got a pension, they can make decisions about the investment sides. If you've got a buy-to-let property, they can deal with it, deal with the tenants, renew the tenancy agreement, things like that. If you've got a business, then they'll have access to the limited company, do the tax, the company accounts, talk to your accountant, things like that. So it's quite
Okay.
hands-on and very powerful.
Right. So you need, like you said, you need to choose the right person or the right people.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't you
If
don't
you
want
choose,
somebody else, knowing something you didn't want to, or somebody who just can't cope with the stress because it is an onerous job.
yeah.
I don't take it very lightly. I always say if someone asks you to be an executor of somebody's will or an attorney, think about it, think twice, know what you're getting into.
Yes, good advice, I think. If you do have two, and I mentioned about my mum wanting us to make decisions three jointly, if you do have two people that you've sort of said, do they have to make things that like it has to be jointly together, or will one person be more senior than the other? I don't know. I'm just a good question, maybe people might be asking.
So you have an option. So on the forms, you have three options. I'm gonna relegate the third one because it's hardly used. The third one is jointly for certain decisions and not jointly for others. So that one we can get rid of because it's not a favorable decision. That leaves us with two options. Number one, it's called jointly and severally. So meaning that it's together essentially. So your two sons, if you appoint them as jointly and severally, what that means is that one or the other, whoever's available and makes that decision, it's just as valid and it'll be valid as if like the other son has also made that decision. It's like a mortgage. So
Right.
say me and my partner, we are jointly responsible for paying the mortgage for our house. And say my partner passes away, the mortgage liability is it has a several I'm severally liable, so it'll pass to me. So it's either or. It's that kind of
Okay.
situation. So I always say that this example, this option is much better because say out of your trusted individuals, say one becomes ill or they move to the other side of the world, in Hong Kong because they've got a job, that becomes really difficult. You're not going to ask them to
Yeah.
come down just for a signature, talk on the phone or whatever else. So this gives you more flexibility and it's more practical. The other option, the second option, it's strictly jointly. So as it says on the tin, your two sons will have to make every decision together jointly. A basic
Right.
decision to the most difficult decisions, they have to be together. Say a check needs to be signed or a contract needs to be signed on your behalf, both signatures are required. One will not do. So as you can see, this one, it creates more inflexibility. It's not practical. It can cause delays as well, because say
Mm.
you're stuck with this, then, you have to wait for your trusted individuals to be available to make that decision. So I'm kind of, it's not something I particularly advise. But I have seen that the clients where they feel they don't fully trust their 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 trusted individuals, they go for this option. But it's quite
Right.
rare. It's quite rare.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think my mum just didn't want to put the strain on one person over another, so that's why she said you've got to make the decisions together. So,
It's fair. I think it's a
but
fair
yeah,
option. Yeah.
yeah. So obviously we've talked about that. We've also talked about you just mentioned the word executor. That is a word as well that people kind of like, well, what exactly is that? Like, it says that I have to, say who's going to do that. What exactly does that mean?
Executor is number one. So we're going back to wills. So executor is attached to a will. It's got nothing to do with the LPAs. Okay. An executor is just a fancy word that when you make a will, you've got to appoint an executor. And that person is just somebody who will be responsible for the administration of that will, meaning adhering and taking those steps and carrying out the wishes in the will. And also dealing with the probate process. That's all it is.
Okay.
A fancy term.
I like the way you say it's all it is, because I feel like there's a little
Honestly,
bit more to probate than but
but I think what people also get thrown off by is the word personal representative, PR, we shorten it for. It's the same as executor.
right. Okay.
It's the same, synonymous. So all it is so you know when you have a will, the first clause in a will is always this: who do you appoint as your executor? So who
Mm,
is going to be that person who's going to administer and do the job that needs to be done when we pass away? That's what it is.
right. Um, Alongside of a will. Now, this was somebody told me this was equally as important. Obviously, executor, guardian, having your will done, who's getting what levels you need to go to about, depending on, if you all passed away all at once, where does your money go and that sort of thing. So all sorts of different things you have to take into account. But one of the things that people told me is really important is something called a letter of wishes. They said this is important to have with your will. I don't think a lot of people realize it, but I understood the reasons why. But can you kind of explain why that's also important?
So when I do wills, it's part of the service. For me, it's where the meat of the actual wishes are. You know, the will becomes a public document. Remember that. Anyone can just pay a couple of pounds, believe it or not, gov.uk
Oh,
slash wills and probate, and you can actually download anyone's will.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
that's
becomes a
something I
public
didn't know.
document. So, which is why when you have certain wishes, certain uh yeah, wishes in the will where you don't want people to know, put it in the letter of wishes. Or certain things that require more detail, there's no point in putting in the will. For example, funeral wishes. My clients can go on and on. I've had a client where, they go down to the detail of, I want everybody to wear purple on my funeral service. That kind of detail doesn't need to be in the body of the will. It's just taking up too much, too many clauses. So I always say put that kind of information in a side note in that letter of wishes, because number one, you can change your mind. So you're not going to come back to me, pay the fees again, and rejig everything. So, put it in the letter of wishes. Another key thing is when there are certain arrangements that have happened in lifetime. For example, say mum and dad and two children live in a house. Sons have contributed to the mortgage. Then certain details can be put in the letter of wishes. For example, mum and dad can say, I know we have split the estate equally, 50-50. However, uh, whoever has paid the mortgage, that the total needs to be balanced out when you distribute the asset. Things like that. You don't want public to know your life affairs. So things like that can be put in the side note in the letter of wishes. Uh, but another reason why it's so important to have a letter of wishes is, I'm going to use another word, when you have a trust in the will.
Right,
Okay, trusts are very complex structures, but they're quite detailed and quite flexible and can be quite vague. And again, you don't want to put it in the body of the will, so all the side stuff can go in the letter of wishes. For example, um, if you've got a child your partner doesn't know about out of extramarital affairs, you've set up a trust. The trust, you and your wife would think, okay, it's only our children, but you can put down that child in that separate
okay,
side note, and nobody will know. Only the executor would know. So a letter of wishes is extremely important. It helps out the executor massively, massively. But the only thing to be very careful about, there's a huge caveat with the letter of wishes, is that it's not legally binding. So the
right,
will obviously is if it's signed properly and you've complied with all the rules, but the letter of wishes is not, meaning that the executors only have a moral duty to honor it. There is no legal duty to honor it, but by and large, the executors do honor it.
right.
It's not very common that it's challenged or whatever else. It's given a lot of weight, I would say.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the things you just said was wills can be downloaded, which I didn't realize at that point. But so everybody who has a will, should that will be uploaded somewhere, or like I don't know, let's say somebody doesn't use a solicitor and they do it themselves,
Mhm.
and they have it in like their drawer in their office, or they're at home or wherever, and you've told somebody where it is, but
Yeah.
it's all legally done with signed and everything else, but it's not up there where someone can download it. What is that a problem for people, or should they have it all uploaded
Let me
somewhere?
clarify. Let me clarify. A will becomes a public document and downloadable on death. So you have to die.
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay.
you have to die first, and in fact, only those wills where the grant of probate was required, that's the only time when that will gets downloadable, if you like. You can get it off the gov.uk. When I mean grant of probate, it's a court order which allows the executors to do their job. Not every probate case requires a grant of probate. So I've kind of limited that. So when I said all wills become public documents with those conditions. So
Okay.
a grant of probate has to be taken out, and then that's when you can actually get it done. Um, yes, sorry, the question. Let's get back to your question. You asked about whether it should be done. So when you've done a will, whether it's a DIY homemade will or through a solicitor, always keep the original somewhere safe. So if you want to pass it to the solicitor who did it, most law firms, we have a fireproof safe cabinet and it'll be there. Or if you have like an accountant or some sort of an advisor where they keep all your documents, pass it on to them. Or if you want to keep it at home, keep it somewhere safe. But what I always say is whoever you have appointed as your executor, let them know where it is. Because when it comes to probate, we need the original will.
Right.
Okay, so always let the executors know, oh, my will is there. So in my case, I've got a folder, it's in my room, second shelf, my brothers know where it is. So it's the first thing there. So there's nothing to, I think there's wills, it's shrouded with secrecy. And that's
Yeah.
the thing I have an issue with, because the more you talk about it, the more you are frank about it, the more it becomes a lot easier for your family members and especially the executor. So I don't really buy into this secrecy. In fact, I encourage my clients to have an open meeting. In fact, one client, I actually forced it. I said, this is too much, too many disputes, high risks, red flags. I had the entire family in a room. They hashed it out. Yes, there were screamings and door bashing and swearing, crying, everything, but it was resolved within 2 weeks. Everybody knew exactly where they were standing. Everybody was happy with it. So I think for me, it's about, open, frank discussion. Be transparent
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. I think the thing is, you don't want, the more you hide, the more likely it is that there'll be disputes and all sorts of things afterwards, depending on where, where you're coming from. And I guess, what's at stake as well, money wise and that sort of stuff. Um,
And
how one of the
disputes.
questions I do have is there a time limitation on like, so let's say, I don't know, let's say somebody's written a will in 2020, in sort of 20, no, let's say 1998 or whatever. Is that will still valid? Like, or is there a time frame that it needed to have been?
As long as in 1998 it was done validly, so in the UK, in England specifically, it needs to be signed by two independent witnesses in front of each other. That's all it is. As long as those conditions are satisfied and it was valid in 1998, your will today is still just as valid. Absolutely.
Okay, that's all right. I mean, years ago, I was a recipient of my uncle's will, but it had not been updated since I was 3 years old. So it was
Okay.
like this massive amount of space and time, and they found it, and they said, "Was there not anyone that was more recent?" And they said no. So yeah, it was like quite, I don't know how old that was by then, but I would
Mhm.
say probably 30 years old or
Wow.
something. But yeah, it was a question that I was just interested in, just to see, like, is there any kind of time frames or whatever? But it's basically
Yeah,
how it's signed.
yeah, absolutely. But I do like those old wills because back in the days, they were written in really, big papers, thick paper with beautiful italic writing. And it was bound by a ribbon. It was just beautiful. You don't get that anymore. So
Yeah.
I do like an ancient will. It's few
Yes.
and far between, but it's always nice.
Um, okay, so we've talked a little bit about, what happens if and all that sort of thing, because I think what people need to be, in some ways, I think they do need to be fearful if they don't do a will, what happens with their estate. Like, you can be on your own or you can be with someone, but if you haven't covered it off, it isn't automatic. And that's where I think the fear should come into people, not the fear of doing a will or creating a lasting power of attorney or any of those things. It's like, what happens if I don't do it? That's where the fear should come in. So I think that obviously is really important. If somebody has done no planning whatsoever, like literally they're sitting there listening to this podcast now, what are the first three steps do you think they should take?
Number one, pen to paper or laptop, whatever is easier. Two columns. Have a list of your assets. What do you own? Start with the house, money in your bank account. Do you have any shareholdings? Jewelry, car. List down all your assets. Do the same for liabilities. Ideally, do it on a laptop so you can update it. So number one, have a list of your assets and liabilities. Number two, just for your own curiosity, find out if you did pass away without a will, who would get your money? That would shock you. So if the most common thing that really makes people do a will is when I have cohabitees, so partners who are not married, but they've been together for years, and they think, oh, we are together, so she'll get everything, he'll get everything. It's not the case. You're not married.
Right.
You are not treated as married couples. She gets nothing, he gets nothing. And that's a huge shocker. So just for, your viewers' interest, find out who gets what. If you don't like the answer, then do a will, which is number two. Get a will done and
Yeah.
get it done in a tax efficient way. I know there are adverts everywhere, £20 wills, £5 wills, but you get what you pay for. It's a very good opportunity to find out where you stand in terms of your inheritance tax liability, because if you're over, this is a very good way to make sure that you can do some tax planning, meaning you can add in a trust, do certain things where on passing, that inheritance tax bill is going to be a lot less. So number two is get a will done. And number three, at the same time, concurrently, I always do it concurrently at the same time, get an LPA done.
Hmm.
Choose, responsible people, appoint them. It's just a bit of signing. You submit it to an organization. They take 2 months. It's registered. Once it's registered, put the LPA forms with the wills, with a printed list of your assets and your liabilities, and put it in an envelope. That's it. That's all you need. 3 documents in one envelope. And then just review it, Hazel. I have a time in the year where I get my laptop out and I have a review my will, my LPAs, my letter of wishes. In fact, I actually updated mine recently, so made a few tweaks. And then just look at my lists of assets and liabilities. What's increased? Where do I stand? Inheritance tax liabilities. So I keep it under review on an annual basis. So that's my 3 top tips, I would say.
Excellent. Because I was
And one
actually going to
thing
ask
is,
you. Oh, yeah,
one thing I
sorry.
was going to say, and let somebody know where that folder is or where that envelope is. It's no good you being very super, super organized, but then nobody can find all this information.
Yes. And one of
That's
the other things that I read recently was that there were some people who'd put those three things in a folder, but also in this little folder they also had things like, these are my bank accounts, this is where my pension is. So everything was like literally there at somebody's fingertips, so they didn't have to go and find where everything was, which I thought was also a really good thing for
I
people
mean,
to
I kept
do.
it quite simple in your answer. So I just said assets and liabilities. But yes, ideally, when I send that to my clients, it's very detailed. So I break it down: bank accounts, who's your car insurance with, social media. People don't realize that, when you have iTunes, Spotify, or PayPal, there's money there. eBay, if you're selling stuff on eBay, that's an asset.
Mm.
It's
You
all your
don't think of it, do
accounts.
you? Yeah.
We have more digital assets than not. We are living in an age where everything is digital. So more reason to document things.
Yeah, yeah. See, those little tips are amazing because they're things that people don't think about as being something that they need to think about. So, and I like the fact that you said about your like a yearly affairs review, because we review everything, like we get our insurance gets updated and something
Exactly.
else gets updated on a yearly basis. But those sorts of things that we need to think about for ourselves is not. Like, for example, I don't know, just a simpler thing like, I don't know, you already have a guardian for your children. A year later, something's changed in that regard, and you've still got the same people or person there. You think, oh, well, that's not really what I want anymore, and I need to go and fix it. That's an amendment that if you don't do and
Exactly.
something happens to you, then, sadly, it might end up not what you really wanted.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's really important to think about those sorts of things. So it's amazing because for me, like I said right at the beginning, who really needs to sit and listen to this? Well, it's everybody. It doesn't matter what age you are, you really, and whatever you're doing in your life, you really need to sort of sort it. I know the last time I did my will, so it probably does need an update. But in terms of the last time, I was like, right, I'm about to fly to Australia and my will isn't updated and I'm going on an aeroplane and I'm sure it's as safe as anything. But that was why I was like, right, it's got to be done and just amended. It wasn't really anything massively, but it was and I went across and I said to my neighbours, I said, right, you need to witness my thing so I know it's all sorted before I go. I mean, it was one of the last things I did before I kind of left, the night before for the airport or whatever. And I think it's people don't think about it. People are traveling and doing all that sort of thing, and it could be that that's when things go wrong.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
Exactly. I mean, it's a very common inquiry. Oh, I'm going on holiday in 2 weeks and do my will. And that's when it becomes a priority. I have to drop all my other cases and do this. It's very common. But I find it quite funny that, people associate flying with death.
Yes,
Whereas I do feel, there are other things on the ground
yes,
where I think that the stats are much higher. So I
they are
always
much
think,
higher.
you don't need this holiday to prompt you to do a will. It should be other things as well. I think it's just, what we grow up with thinking and what's sticking with us and what's being circulated in society for so long.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think a lot of it is that fear has been put inside of us about talking about money, about talking about where we're going to leave our money. All of that, the fear of talking about someone passing away, all of those sorts of things mean it's a very difficult, discussion piece. It's not like, oh, I'm getting married and where's my marriage certificate? Or I've just had a baby and here's the birth certificate. It's like it's a not taboo subject, but it is a lot harder to talk about.
It's painful.
So
It's
it
painful.
is.
I always it's kind of very touching when I do wills for parents with young children and I get them to do a letter of wishes. But with those parents, I really drill it down. I always say to them, go into detail in your letter of wishes about schooling. How many times would you like them to see their grandparents from either side? Holidays, extracurricular activities, things like that. And the people who put in effort, because they always send it to me to read it, and it's just so touching. It's
Wow.
extremely touching. It's very emotional, actually. But it's a task well worth it.
Well, um, how can people work with you? Because I know you have a special like package as well that you have just launched. So did
Yes.
you want to tell people about that? But also how else can they work with you?
Yes, so I you can contact me through email, which is samina@ashhillsolicitors.co.uk, or directly on my mobile, which is 07547193330. And I can help with any issues or queries relating to wills, trusts, inheritance tax planning, probate, LPAs, things like that, or people who don't have mental capacity, so deputyship orders. I do those as well. So that's the usual way, and I can help out with the advice. But what I realized, Hazel, was especially after COVID, there is a need with what I provide in the legal advice. But what I found was with the combination of issues, so the cost of living crisis, COVID, and everything else, a lot of people felt there were, they need the advice. They know they need a will, an LPA, but the cost was never, something that they could meet, but and it was never the right time. So I actually realized that I need to meet this need. So what I launched was at the beginning of this year. It's a legal express service. What this offers is a half an hour slot or a session or a meeting where you have a specific question or a query relating to my specific area, and I'll give you the answer there and then. For example, you've done the LPA yourself and you want me to have a look at it. I'll check it for you to make sure everything is correct. Another example is, somebody you've done your own will and it's outdated. You want me to check whether you need to change anything or something needs to be added. Some circumstances have changed. So I'll review it for you and tell you. Or you want to know how inheritance tax works or where you stand, I'll tell you how that works as well. So it's a very targeted service. So you'll get the answer there and then. Think of it as a pay as you go service, if you like.
Yeah.
As it's half an hour, £55, you get your answer there and then. What it avoids, Hazel, if I just want to add, is people have specific queries. They don't want to pay solicitors' fees for hours and,
Yeah.
get into lengthy retainers with terms and conditions. So this is it basically circumvents that. So if you've got a very basics, any question, specific question, very happy to, answer it. Half an hour, £55 flat fee.
Yeah. See, I think that's a really good service because, we do have specific questions. It could be around how, I don't know, something about guardians for your children, or it could be something else. And you just think, I just don't know. I'm muddled in my head. I don't know what I should be looking for. I don't know the sort of thing I need to be thinking about. Just sometimes it takes someone outside of to take that fear away, to take that kind of unanswered question and answer it, and I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And I think it's a win-win situation. You need the help. I've got the answers. It's a perfect match, you know.
Yes. Yes, I think so. I think it's a really good service. When you told me
Thank
about
you.
it, I was like, yes, that's a really cool thing. People need it. So,
No, thank you. You've been very
um,
supportive, so I really appreciate it, Hazel.
oh, always. When I see something that's really worth it, I'm going to support it all the way. So, um, so thank you, Samina, so much because I think you've demystified a lot of things and helped people realize the absolute importance of the things that we are fearful of, but the things we shouldn't be fearful of. Because if we stand up and do what we're supposed to do, then we're leaving, our lives the way we need to, leave them, rather than someone having to make up decisions for us or thinking about what we would have wanted or, all sorts of things. We can own that and we can be responsible for that. And I think that's a really important tool that we have inside of us that we have to use. So
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Hazel. I really do hope I have demystified and I hope this has been helpful to at least if one person has got something out of it, then I'm happy with that.
yeah, don't worry. I'm sure we've all got lots of things out of it. You might be getting lots of people going, I haven't done one. So I hope so. All right. So thank you again, Samina. And I'll be
Thank you.
distributing this across so everybody will be able to listen to it on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and across YouTube. So
Thank you very much,
yeah,
Lisa.